Well, thank you, Dan, for that gracious introduction. I sat there holding my breath, hoping he wouldn't topple over into a scandal. He'd been suggesting all week that he was going to say something really very, very frightening, but it was sort of teetering on the brink of blackmail, but not quite. He made everything up, basically. Well, I'm very happy to be here. It's been quite an evening, just an extraordinary procession of wonderful people and all sorts of extraordinary events, so meeting Muhammad Ali, hearing about everything that we've heard about this evening. I felt very honored and very thrilled, but also a little bit melancholy because those of us who knew Norman Mailer and Norris really missed them very much. When I heard that Norman had died, when I read the obituaries, I just felt such a loss and sort of a sinking sensation that something had gone out of literature that would probably not ever come back, because Norman represented not only the very most ambitious and passionate of his writer of his generation, but basically just the spirit of a certain kind of American writer that I think is possibly not going to come again. He's a very antithesis of minimalism. He was like a maximalist. And I have a couple of Norman Mailer stories. I didn't know Norman very well. I got to know him in the last years of his life, maybe the last 10 years or so. I guess he was more mellow. He had been married 6 times, and he was at that point married to Norris. And as you all know, Norris is one of those most beautiful women who ever lived, I think. And the beauty of her physical beauty was matched by an inner spiritual beauty, and she was really quite extraordinary. So I knew them as a couple. But there was a wonderful, the 2 Norman Mailer stories. The first is the first time I met Norman. It was an event at Lincoln Center, and Norman seemed to be the moderator, I guess. He was sort of in charge. And I was one of a group of a number of people who were giving readings. It was for some fundraiser. So I came out on stage, and Norman was so nice to me, and he shook my hand, and he introduced me. And he said that Joyce Carol Oates has written this remarkable book on boxing. And he let that sort of sink into the eyes. Then he said, it was so good, I almost thought I'd written it myself. And there were just waves of really good-natured laughter from the audience, and he seemed a little puzzled, like, well, why is that funny? He meant that to be the highest praise. And I think in speaking of Norman Mailer, we're speaking of the male ego raised to the very highest, without which we wouldn't have a civilization, I'm sure. Then my other Norman Mailer story. This is a wonderful Norman Mailer story which made a strong impression on me when I was a younger writer. And Norman Mailer had an extraordinary success, as you all know, with his first novel, The Naked and the Dead, which was published in 1948. He was just in his mid-20s. This novel caused him he had an extraordinary success, like his distinguished predecessor, Lord Byron, who woke up and discovered that he was famous. This is wonderful remark about Byron waking up. And his life has changed irrevocably when you're famous at a young age. So Norman woke up and he was famous, but he didn't quite understand that he was also infamous. And the book was considered like pornography in some quarters. It rose to the top of the bestseller list in the United States and in the UK. It was a bestseller for about 62 weeks, which is really quite remarkable. Then Norman said, and I'm not sure that I'm paraphrasing or quoting him accurately, he had a way of talking about himself in the third person, which many women don't do. It's a strange predilection when you hear a person talking about himself in the third person. You think, well, this is a little different. So I can't probably mimic that exactly. But he said that part of me thought that I was the greatest writer since Tolstoy, but another part of me thought, I'm an imposter. I don't know how to write at all. So this was in 1948. And then he worked on a novel called Barbary Shore, which was published in 1951. And I hardly need tell you that all the critics who loved him the first time were now all waiting to pounce on him. And I think the reviews were probably almost universally negative. Maybe almost as bad as all the reviews that Moby Dick received, which were all completely abysmally negative. So Norman had gone from being a genius and heralded as this fantastic writer to being somebody who couldn't write at all. And some of the reviews were very deeply insulting. So then he said, and again, I'm not exactly quoting him, he said he felt like a punch-drunk boxer who's in the ring and he's been hit and he gets up and he gets hit again, he falls down, he gets up and he's knocked down again, and finally the bell rings and he's completely exhilarated and giddy because though he's been humiliated, he got through the fight. And then he said that something inside him shifted and he felt that he would be an outlaw. I thought that was beautifully expressed, that from that point onward, Norman Mailer would not try to please an audience or critics or reviewers. He would write the books he wanted to write. As Oliver Stone said so beautifully early this evening, writing is a rebellious act and artists are rebels. There's something transgressive about being a writer. It has its spiritual component, but it also has a component of being a warrior and going in places where you're not welcome. And critics and reviewers and others will say, nobody's done this before, and they haven't done it quite the way you're doing it, therefore it has to be wrong. So you have to have a certain resilience, and that's where Norman's enormous and wonderful ego came into play and was very valuable. But at the same time, Norman had a great deal of ardor and passion, and he had this spiritual commitment to his work. I like to feel that I am the same way. I feel that in my own writing, I'm trying to bear witness for people and whole segments of people and populations, and just the human spirit where people can't speak for themselves. They don't have language. They may not even be alive any longer. They have had experiences that have rendered them mute. And it's up to the writer and the artist to give voice to these people. So there are two impulses in art. One is toward being a rebel and going in places that are transgressive where people don't want you, and you'll be perhaps punished for that. But the other is a way of sympathy and of evoking sympathy for people who may be different from us and people whom we don't know. Art is a way of breaking down the barriers between people. And these two seemingly antithetical impulses toward rebellion and toward sympathy come together in art. So thank you very much.